All right, let me get this straight. We spend 4 years in high school under the immense pressure of every grade we will get will impact our college acceptance. We spend years preparing for a standardized test that will determine if we are smart enough or a good enough test taker to be accepted into a top choice college. We spend years being told that a four-year university is the only option post high school if you want to be successful and get a job one day. Then, after all that, we receive no mental health support or life skills to cope with the intense amount of stress, rejection, and fear that comes with the process. Then, if we go to a four-year university, we spend 4 years under the immense pressure of exploiting every opportunity, class, internship, and job to be hired in a good enough paying job to start paying off our student debt. Yet, there is no formal education on developing life skills to cope with the pressure and stress that comes with life, or to teach you how to reach out for help, or to care for ourselves or maintain mental well-being. Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Regater, and today I'm joined by Melissa Foulks, a licensed marriage and family therapist practicing virtually in California. Join us as we explore the stress and pressures associated with the pre- and post-college life, from applying to colleges to finding a job post-graduation. Melissa, thank you so much for joining me today. I am really excited to talk with you. But before we begin, I just want to check in. How are you really?
Well, thanks for having me, Fran. I'm so excited to be here and chat with you today. And that's a great question. How am I doing really? I am feeling a little stressed today. I'm working, I'm meeting with you. It's the middle of the week. We're recording this on a Wednesday. So I'm feeling a little stressed today.
Oh, thanks for being so honest. It is stressful when you're working, you have other commitments, the middle of the week. I always find like the middle of the week to be so stressful because you've had so much happening before, and then you still have so much more to do before you can take a break. It's a lot in that moment.
It is. It is. I feel like Mondays I'm pretty clear. I'm recharged from the weekend. Maybe by Thursday, Friday, I'm like, all right, I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'm ready for a break. But you are catching me in the thick of my week on a Wednesday. So I have to be honest, right? I'm a therapist, so I like to model that for people of like, it's okay to show up and not always be good, right? We're so inclined to just always answer, oh, I'm good.
Yes, exactly. And that's like one of my biggest pet peeves is this idea that we have to be good and fine all the time. Like, realistically, as a human, we're going to experience every emotion. Like, we can't control that. We are. And to
Oh,
sit
yeah.
here and think that, oh, everyone's feeling just good and fine all day, every day is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's not realistic at all. We are human beings. Days are going to be good, and maybe that's fine to answer that, but there are going to be days where you're feeling other things. And like I said, important to share that, right? And I love how you prompted that. Like, how are you doing really? Because we're so conditioned to just say, oh, yeah, good. But yeah, how are you really doing?
Yeah, because otherwise it's honestly turned into such a greeting, right? It's turned into the automatic, good, keep walking, right?
Yep.
Not even a response to the other person. Most of the time we don't ask the other person. We just kind of continue walking and never take a moment to just reflect. If we're not checking in with ourselves and being honest with ourselves, it's really, really hard to get to a place where we are genuinely feeling good.
Yeah, it is. It's such a like formality, right? Like to just say, how
Mhm.
are you? And yeah, we kind of almost like dismiss it, or we just feel that we have to say good so we can kind of continue on of, okay, what else are we doing here in this song and dance? But yeah, to take that moment and really check in with someone, check in with ourselves.
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, especially at like this time in our lives where we're both at that stage where I'm still in grad school. But I know you've graduated, you're licensed, you have a practice, you're ways
Yes.
ahead of me. But like that post-college stress when I don't know about you, but I had this idea when I graduated, life was just gonna like work out. Like I thought I was gonna get my bachelor's and suddenly be like a full businesswoman, like a millionaire or something. I don't know. I never thought about one, debt, two, like finding a job. It's no one's just gonna walk up to you and be like, here's like the best job ever. Here you go. It's not as easy as it was built up in my head. So all this like stress and pressure every day from this like idea that society gave me. I don't know where I got it from. I'm assuming society, that it's just so hard to like be good and okay every day. I'm like stressed.
Yeah. And I really resonate with that because I felt the same way. I graduated with my undergrad, my bachelor's, and I thought, yeah, okay, I did that, right? You do that whole thing and you're like, okay, hand me the job. Where's the money? Where's like that money to get your own place, to support yourself? And you think it's gonna all work out and you recognize it's rocky out there to get a job and to set yourself up for success for life while managing, yeah, stress and other mental health challenges that might be presenting.
Yes, and learning like life shifts so much too in that time, right? So I had taken like time off between undergrad and grad, and I just remember trying to figure out how to get a job, how to take care of my mental health and just like stay alive. And then like how to have a social life and have friends and like stay connected with my current friends that I had, but also make new friends because suddenly I'm not sitting in class next to you and we're not exchanging phone numbers to study. I have to learn how to talk to people in a different capacity. It just felt so, I feel like overwhelming is not even a strong enough word, but overwhelming.
Oh, yeah. And what you're describing, I work with a lot of clients who are right out of either high school or primarily work with a lot of people who are right out of college. And they describe that same thing that you are saying of the struggle to, yeah, just take care of himself, but also like make connections, right? Friendships that come so much harder once we're out of school.
And then the whole like layer of who am I? Who do I want to be? Am I in like the right path and career place for me? Is this what I represent? Are these my values? Like just trying to figure it all out because at least for me, I think up until maybe like a year into college, I aligned with what my parents believed and thought and valued. And then I started to become my own person when I was no longer in the household and I started questioning, well, why do I believe this? Why do I value this? Why is this important to me? Is it all important to me? And by the time I graduated, I was like, I have no idea. I don't know what I believe in. I don't know what I stand for. I have no idea. How do I find a community of people? How do I find a job? How do I find all these things that represent my values of who I am today, who I hope to be, when I can't even like figure out who I am right now?
Yeah, it's so overwhelming, right? And at least maybe when you're in school, you have those people you're studying with or sitting next to, and those people can influence you in ways. I remember being in undergrad and having a group of friends and them influencing decisions that I was making or who I was becoming. But then I think when you step away from that environment and are more on your own, it's like, yeah, who am I aside from my friends, aside from my parents, aside from school? Again, talk about overwhelm, right? That's a lot to put on just you to make like that journey of finding yourself and finding what it is you want to do.
And then all of that, we're supposed to be like, oh, I'm good. I'm fine. Like, it's a lot. If you are completely good and fine in every single moment after that, like, call me and tell me how and like what you're doing. Because I am okay and fine and good like 25% of the time. And 75% of the time, I am stressed and feeling overwhelmed, feeling confused, feeling maybe down because I thought I would be further, feeling unmotivated. I'm feeling all these different things all the time and trying to learn how to not allow that to consume my mind, not to allow it to consume my life. But I will say 75% of the time, I am not just like perfect and good and fine and happy. I'm like, what am I doing? How can I get through this next moment? Let's take a deep breath. So anyone who's figured it out, let me know, please.
Let me know as well, because I, have been through the grad school, the undergrad. I'm done with all my schooling. I hopefully won't be going back to do anymore. And I'm still trying to just figure out life. I think that's something that we need to normalize. We're always just all trying to figure it out. So yes, if someone has it all figured out, call us both and let us know, because anyone I know hasn't figured it all out. And maybe that's part of it, is just normalizing, again, that's okay to not know, right? And to figure it out, and one day at a time.
Yes, absolutely. Normalizing the fact that we're always changing and growing and learning and evolving, and so is society and the world around us. So it's okay to not know today. It's okay to realize that you don't have to have it all figured out. I think there's this idea, at least for me, there was this idea that I need to figure it all out. I need to have it all figured out, like the meaning of life, like today, right now. And realistically, like no one has it all figured out. Everyone's doing the best they can with the tools they have at that time. And well, hopefully they're doing the best they can with the tools and resources that they have at that time. And that's it. And we're all taking it one step at a time. We're all learning and failing and succeeding and growing, falling down, getting back up a million times throughout life. It's never just gonna snap your fingers and life be perfect because I mean that would be boring. Like who wants I mean honestly, I don't know. Maybe I do want it for like a minute to just see what it's like. But who wants it to be so boring where you don't get the ups and the downs? Because if you don't have those downs, you don't know what it's like to fall down. You're not going to know what it's like to rise and feel the excitement of all the good that's happened.
Exactly. Yes. I tell my clients that so often because I'm walking with them in some of the most challenging moments of their life. And I try to let them see that, like, okay, think back to another tough time you've probably been through where, yeah, you didn't have it figured out and it was challenging. But look, you're on the other side of that. You can look back and reflect, and it's built you up into where you are today. And now you're facing another challenge, but you will get through it. And it's building the resilience, right? And letting you have, like you said, the highs and the lows. They're so important. Life isn't just always like at this baseline, everything is good and great, as we're talking about. Oh, it's good. It's going to have those lows. So recognizing the lows will pass and they're part of everyone's experience. And what am I learning here and what can I grow and really process from this experience?
Yes, and I love what you said about building resiliency skills because I think I'm talking for myself again. I think there's like this idea that we're just like born resilient. Like kids are so resilient. I used to hear people say that all the time. Oh, don't worry.
Oh,
Kids are
yeah.
resilient. They'll get through it. But no one's teaching us the skills and tools to get through it. So, I mean, sure, you fall down the first time and you cry and you get back up and it's okay and everything's okay. But eventually it's becomes more and more difficult when you feel like you're falling more and more and more. So building resiliency skills and not assuming that we have to have it innately with us within us to know what to do and how to get through it. I mean, I did not handle grief well at all. I did not handle coping with stress and pressure because I didn't have any tools in my toolbox at that point. I didn't know I needed to. I just did not know what to do. So building resiliency skills is so important. So important to recognize that it is something we can build.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're not taught it, right? It's like, okay, you're off in the world. You got to figure it all out. And when you fall, yeah, you're opening that toolbox and maybe there's nothing in it because school, I feel like it's like, okay, we're learning academics, maybe we're learning life experiences, but we're not taught some of the things that we really need to know. It's like we're figuring it out on our own. It's these life lessons. And when you're younger, I think resilience is built a little bit through like, okay, you fall when you're little, like physically fall, right? And okay, your parents like, okay, you fall and get back up. It's okay. You're fine. It's okay. Shake it off. And then we become adults and we don't often hear that. We fall and maybe our friends are doing that or maybe our family, but we're kind of left to our own devices to figure it out. And then, as you said, opening that toolbox and what's there. Maybe there isn't anything to support yourself. So what do you do now?
Yeah, exactly. What do you do? And I think that's so important to recognize. Like you said, we're not learning this in school. I mean, I took 2 years of calculus, 2 years of physics, 2 years of chemistry, like thinking back to all the things I took, not saying it's not important. I'm sure there's certain things I may or may not use in life. I don't know. Haven't used it yet, but possibly will. But I never learned how to cope with the stress and pressures that I face every day. How about the pressure of getting into college, of figuring out whether or not I want to go to college? There was no, like, let's cope with this. Let's learn how to process and get through, handle rejection, because realistically, we're not going to get into every college we apply to. It's not easy. And this is something that's so much part of the academic environment, and yet it's something that is often just like just under the rug and expect that we're going to handle being rejected by our top choice college that we spent 4 years working endlessly for. Like that's a lot to deal with on its own. And then that pressure of, do I want to go to school? Where do I want to school? What do I want to major in? Having to have your whole life figured out in your mind. Everyone's asking you these questions and you're like 17, 18 years old. It's a lot. And yet we're not teaching kids to like get through that.
No, there's no emotional support around it. At least when I was in that, you're unlocking some of my core memories now of like applying to schools and having a top choice and not getting in. And I remember I was reflecting on this when I graduated grad school 3 years ago now, and I graduated with a 4.0, and I was never a school person. So that was such a huge achievement for me. And I reflected on the time where my guidance counselor told me in high school when we were applying, helping me, decide where to go for undergrad, for my bachelor's, like, oh, maybe school isn't for you. Like maybe you should just go to community college or yes, very discouraging. And there was no emotional support around it. It was just very matter of fact, because I wasn't the A student. I was more of like the B, the high C, more of a street smart person than book smart, and would have loved the emotional support around processing not getting into my top school and not having the best SAT scores at that time, and being really confused by the process of thinking, okay, I wanted to go to this school, I didn't get in, and now the rest feels like I don't want to do any of it. And then they, following me later in life to then I'm in grad school and succeeding and thinking, well, why did that person tell me that maybe school isn't for you? Maybe just go to a community college. And also, why are we talking down on community college? Why couldn't I have gone to a community college for 2 years and emotionally processed and figured out what I wanted instead of it being like a shameful thing?
Oh my goodness, that just unlocked a memory for me too. Like thinking back to it, are guidance counselors, like, or academic advisors, whatever the high schools call them, are they supposed to tell us like straight to our faces? So like directly, like, no, you're not getting in. That's what the my guidance counselor said to me when I said the school I ended up going to was UF and for undergrad and my first master's. And I remember my advisor being like, that's a reach for you. You're not getting in. There's no way. And like, that wasn't even my top choice. That was like my backup. And
Oh my
I did not
gosh.
get into my top choice, by the way. 3 times I've applied and not gone in, so I'm done. But it's fine. Clearly, I love the rejection from them. No, but I remember like going home to my mom crying, and I was like, I'm not even gonna get into like my backup. Now I need a backup. I don't know what to do, and just like falling apart. And my mom's like, what just happened? You went to school like so excited for life, and you came home and you're like, I don't know who I am. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not good enough. I mean, I feel like there's a much more supportive way to go about these conversations, that we're giving kids the tools to cope or to understand, okay, these schools are difficult to get into. Not everyone gets into them. That's okay. Here's how you can find other options to also apply to. Here's schools that you can compare, or let's look at the cost of the tuition of the schools you're looking at. Like, I think we could make it a much easier, more comprehensive, I don't even know the word, but just an all around more informative and productive conversation by actually giving kids the tools they need, instead of being like, you're not getting in, give up. Like, don't do it, don't try.
Right. Like, yeah, even those words for you or the words for me of like, maybe school isn't for you, or why isn't there support around it emotionally? Again, that's where I get stuck of like, you're not a failure, you're not bad. It's like you said, it's competitive, it's tough to get in. So having that support, as you continue then to go through the search or application process, or do you pick your backup school, and is there shame when you go there because yeah, that wasn't my top choice and it wasn't my backup? What does that feel like? It's like from that start, we're not really supporting people through it. And again, this was a bit ago for me, so I don't know if the process has changed or other schools have more compassionate counselors, but this is just my experience with it.
Yeah, and it's heartbreaking. Think about like looking back at like my 17-year-old self, how devastated I felt and how much I hated myself for it. Like, I was like, I should not have gone out with my friends all those nights. I should not have done this. I shouldn't have done this. I should have studied harder. I should have taken the SAT another time. I should have taken a prep course. Like, all these should have, would have, could have's constantly in my mind, and like attacking myself when, like, again, it's challenging, it's competitive, it's not meant to be an easy process getting into school. Don't know why they make it so difficult to take our money. Like, someone explain that to me. But like, it's a lot happening. And then, like you said, that shame of community college, or even going to like a technical school, right? Going into trades. There's so many different options available, and yet I feel like those aren't what's discussed. It's, you need to get into a 4-year university. Here's how, but not even like, here's how. It's like, apply, write really good papers, do well on your SATs, but not here are step-by-step tools you can use. Here's how you can get through if you are rejected by a school. It's okay. It's not, the world is not going to end. But I think at that time, it feels like the world's going to end because that's where all the stress and pressure
Mhm.
is directed to.
Yeah, that's your reality. You're doing, I remember at that time doing like SAT prep, doing SATs twice, the applications, right? You're on deadlines. So it encompasses such a huge part of your life when you're in high school towards the end. And then, yeah, where did you get in? Where are you committing to? It's a whole thing. So when it's not like super supportive, it's, well, your world might be crashing down because what else do you have going on? You poured so much into this. And yeah, that word shame keeps coming up for me, even when you were describing some of the experiences you've had. It could create a lot of shame for people.
It really can. And it's so frustrating to me that, a lot of times adults look back at that time and they're like, it's not the end of the world. Like, it's going to continue on. But like at that age, it is the end of the world to you because that's your whole world. That is everything
Hmm.
you've been working for the last 4 years or 12 years, however long you've been thinking about school and your next steps. At
Right.
that point in time, that is your entire future, is what your next step is post high school. That's a very overwhelming feeling. There's not a million other things happening at that time. There's one big thing that you've been focused on. So for an adult looking back, it's like, oh, I went through it and I did get in or I didn't get in, but I survived. It's fine. But I feel like a lot of times they don't put themselves back in their shoes of like their 17, 18-year-old self and think like, wow, that was overwhelming. How can I help my child or the next generation get ready so that they can get through those moments? Because I'm sure that just like the generation before us didn't handle it any easier than we did. I'm sure it was even more difficult. People had to actually like request paper applications. They couldn't even do it online. I found that
Hmm.
out the other day. I was shocked. Blew my mind.
Yeah, right. Just to even think of it in terms of technology. I mean, even I think when I applied, I'm trying to remember, I think it was online, but I remember, do they still do, I know I saw a show recently where people were showing them finding out via email if they got in or if they were deferred or on the wait list, whatever it looked like. I remember getting letters, like checking my mail, my actual like mailbox, like snail mail for my decisions from colleges and how stressful that was every day coming home from school and obsessively checking the mail. Not that I think, I'm sure people now are obsessively checking email, but just funny to think, right? Like how it evolves even then.
Yeah, and I was watching Gilmore Girls, and that's where the whole paper thing came
Oh,
from,
yeah.
for reference. But I was thinking about like how, okay, all I had to do was submit like click a button on time. Figure out like do everything else for it, but submit, like click the button on time. And then I was like, oh my goodness, what if I like forgot to mail it? Like what if, or the mail was delayed because there was a flood or something happened that mail got delayed and my application never made it on time. Like I started to think about how difficult like it was before. So I can't imagine that it was any less stressful back then as it is now. So why haven't we learned to give people tools to get through it?
I know. I'm scratching my head at the same thing. And now I'm thinking of my application and process to become a licensed therapist. To get your license, it's all paper applications that I had to fill out and send in. And you have a lot of worry of, and this was last year. So their process is very old school. And you have those same fears of, oh my gosh, did I forget to fill something out? Did I submit it right? Like, but even just in the paper sense, did it get lost in the mail? Or did I forget to sign something? Which actually, spoiler, I did because there were so many papers that I forgot to sign. The one most important thing that they probably wanted from me, which was my check, my application fee. I forgot to sign the check, exposing myself and showing how, I too am imperfect and processes of applications. I think for me, looking back, I remember people saying, well, why didn't you sign the check? That seems like the most obvious thing. But it's like, well, again, if I'm looking at it in the emotional sense, it was very emotional for me. I had completed 3,000 hours. I had my master's degree at this point. So I was post grad and I'm submitting a huge application with a lot of paper materials when I'm used to doing a lot of things digitally this day and age. So to muddle through it, and it's not that I just picked it up one day and submitted it. I had been working on it for like 3 months. I had it on my desk. So that last piece, I think I was just emotionally in a different mindset that I forgot to sign that. So thinking about, even again, right, we're talking about the emotions in the college process. It's like, well, what's it like for people filling out those applications or making those decisions or writing the essays, taking the tests, the SATs? It's, you're in such an emotional place. Your judgment is often skewed.
Absolutely. So first of all, in other words, it's gonna get more difficult for me. So excited. Thank you for the heads up.
Oh,
Can't
yes.
wait.
If anything, learn from my mistake. And that's why I talk about it. I actually shared on social media that I forgot to do that. And I remember like that I forgot to sign the check, and I was sharing my process because it delayed my application. And I had someone comment like, well, I wouldn't want to go to a therapist who forgot to sign the check and made that mistake. And I'm like, well, you don't,
relevant.
I'm like, you don't have to see me. I'm just sharing that I'm imperfect. So then I can inspire and normalize for other people like yourself who's going through the process to become a therapist, right? That, well, double check if you're doing a paper application that you've signed everything, but it's okay to make mistakes. Just because you have a certain job or profession doesn't mean that you have to have it all together. I'm, like we were saying before, like how I'm showing up and saying I'm stressed today. I'm human too. You're human too. We're all just going through whatever part of life we're in.
Yes, and we're gonna make so many mistakes. I mean, forgetting to sign a check that's so easy to happen. Like, it's not something that's like, wow, how did you not remember? You're signing a million things. First of all, who
Exactly.
even writes checks anymore? I recently learned to write a check. Like,
Thank you.
right? Like, it's not as maybe like common sense and easy to like know how to even write a check, first of all. And second of all, when you have a million things to sign and a million papers, and you are like super excited, but then super overwhelmed, and it's so much happening, and you worked so hard for this. Please accept my application. Please give me my license. Like,
yes,
it's a lot. I'm stressed now thinking about this. That's years away from me. It's not easy, and it's okay to not get it right all the time, to make a mistake. You're still licensed. It all worked out. So it's okay to make the mistake. It's just learning how to cope with the fact that, hey, I messed up, but let me fix it. Let me get through this. Let me take the next step forward instead of feeling so stuck in it, which I think happens so often, that we kind of internalize every mistake and we're like, this is what I did. I can't get through it. I'm done. I know that's me, at least. Like, I'm done.
No, that's how I was too. I was so in my emotions that day because they send it back and say, well, you didn't fill this out. You're very much in that emotional space, but then have to switch over to logic and say, okay, well, this is for my future. Now I need to figure out how to fix the mistake. But I'm also feeling shameful, that word again, that I did that, but normalizing, right? Like there's a lot going on. Normalizing, yes, it was a lot of papers to sign, and okay, mistakes happen. I'm not perfect, but just feeling sad for myself that I messed up some. So I think that came up for me because I'm just now processing and connecting it back to the whole, like we're speaking about, college application.
And I mean, and the emotions and logic don't necessarily go together very well. Not for me.
No.
I can't. If I'm very emotional, all logic is gone. Like, you can tell me what to do, and I'm like, nope, the world has ended. I'm done. I don't know how to figure this out. And it's like, no, do this. I'm like, I can't. Like, it's just in my head, at that space, I cannot. I need to process the emotions and get through the emotions so I can return back to thinking logically.
Oh, I talk about that all day, every day. I'm always saying it's so infrequent that logic and emotions are aligned. People tend to be more, at least my clients are usually in their emotions. And I say, just start there, process, feel, and then move to the logic. And that's even to ease myself back to that day I found out I didn't sign the check. I was like, all right, I'm going to cry about it. I'm going to have like a little moment. I'm going to feel and process and take a deep breath and kind of ground myself in it, and then go into the logic for a bit and say, well, how can I fix this? And I fixed it and I sent it back. I signed it, blah, blah, blah. And then I allowed myself to return back to the emotion and really feel it.
So important that we allow our process to feel and to move through, instead of just expecting us to like turn it off. Like, you can't turn off, at least maybe you can turn off emotions. I don't know. I can't. I can't just like turn them off and not feel them anymore. I wish I could, because that would help me so much. Like to be like, okay, just stop, feel later. Like no, I can't. I'm not good at that. Maybe it's possible, but it does remind me of my class on Monday. So like 2 days ago, I had class, and my teacher asked us like, what's your standard approach for new challenges? And it was like a poll that was anonymous. Like we couldn't see each other's answers. We didn't know what other people were saying. And I said the only thing that could come to my mind was cry, then try. Okay, that was the only thing that could come to my mind. Everyone else was like critical thinking, ask someone else for advice, step by step, break it down, simplify. I was like, how did people come up with this? Like emotionally, you said challenge, and I was like, cry. That's it. That's step one for me. So maybe it is possible to be like logical, like everyone else apparently in my class was. But for me, like when I feel I experience a challenge, I reach something that feels difficult, I need that moment to like process the emotions that come up and to cry and to feel before I get to that logic part. And like, that's okay.
It's normal. You're going to have a reaction. And I'm sure all of those other people would too. I wonder if they were, and no shame to any of those answers. I think those are great answers, but I wonder if it reminds me of what we talked about when we opened, right? Of how are you? And most people just say good. For them, did it feel like a formality of like, well, how would I really logically do this? Instead of putting themselves in the shoes of, well, if they really were in a challenge, how do they handle it? Yeah, maybe you do get to the critical thinking, but you're going to have a reaction. Again, we are human. So I love to say that this episode, I've been really just highlighting that, right? Like we're human, we're going to show up with those emotions. So I think fair that you want to say, well, I'll cry and then try. So maybe for them, they just kind of eliminated the emotional part, but they're human beings. So it has to be there. I just think maybe they gave a formal answer.
Yeah. And I mean, not to say that everyone needs to cry. Like, I know that not everyone needs to cry for every challenge. I'm sometimes a little emotional and I like to cry it out. That's for me. And some people don't need to cry it out. Some people might feel something for X amount of time and then be able to get through it in a different way. For me, that is crying. That's how I process, because I'm at a point where most of the time I'm feeling really stressed and overwhelmed is my baseline. So crying helps me. So the cry and try, I was like, that describes me. It was the only thing that came to my mind. And now I am curious, my classmates, if what their emotional experience is like. Is it like, do they cry, or do they like feel overwhelmed for a minute, figure it out, get through, and then can think like, oh, I need to think critically, I need to simplify? Because my brain could literally only get like cry then try. That was the only thing that could come to my mind, because for me, I am very much in my emotions and then I move to the next. But emotions are very big for me.
I love that you're connected to it, and I love your vulnerability and honesty with that answer. And also I love that slogan, cry and then try, or cry and try. Like, I think that needs to be on like a sticker or your new trademark, because that's amazing. I think a lot of people would identify with that. Again, especially my clients, I seem to have a lot of people who lead with big emotions first and then go into the logic. So yeah, I would be curious for all of those people who answered more in the logic sense, right? Like part 2 to that poll, maybe, of what came up emotionally, or if you were to revisit this, like what emotion comes up first when you are in a challenging situation.
I mean, Nike says just do it. I say cry then try. We all
I love it. I love it.
But yeah, I would love to know other people's experience now, because we all experience things differently. Different emotions are brought up for everyone. Some people experience more frustration that may lead to more of an anger outburst. Some people may experience more of like I just shut down and go numb for a bit. Some people may be able to like kind of laugh it off. Like everyone responds differently. One of my best friends, I always tell her the thing I like envy most about her is that like something can affect her, but it doesn't like stop her. So for me, like that's it. Like I shut down for a bit and I need to cry and process and get through like in that moment. Versus for her, someone can say something mean to her and she'll like feel it for a little bit and then she's like laughs and she's like, they're annoying. Like that's not true. Like her confidence is at that point where she can like think logically so much quicker then I'm like, I'm probably still crying for another month about what someone said. And then getting to the point where I'm like, they're just being mean. Like, it's okay. It's not the truth.
Yeah, and that's okay. Everyone is going to be different in how they respond and how their logic and where their emotions are, right? And maybe it's situationally what you have going on. Maybe for you, like your life is a little more stressful right now while you're in school and pursuing something. So the emotions are going to be heavier, whereas maybe in a different space and time, emotions will present differently. So I think too, like looking what's going on around you, right? And well, why am I crying? And why is this challenge so tough? Have I endured a lot of challenges recently? And this just feels like, oh my gosh, another challenge. Or maybe, life feels fairly light and easy right now. And it's like, all right, I can master this challenge, right? Even how we were talking about earlier, like Monday, okay, I wake up and I feel like pretty ready for the week. I really intentionally take time to recharge on the weekend. But then maybe by Wednesday, challenge and my stress level is different. So my emotions are going to be higher.
Yes, I love that. Looking at your environment and what's happening, what you've been going through. For me, I definitely will notice that sometimes I can let something go a lot sooner, but there are certain things people can say that will be like knife through the heart hurt. And
Mm-hmm.
I will just be stuck in that for a little bit because it's so personal to me and it's something that I'm so stressed and overwhelmed about in that moment. And it's so important to realize that, like, for example, one thing I do is I'm my grandmother's caregiver. She has Alzheimer's and I'm with her all the time. And when she's physically next to me, I'm significantly more stressed than when someone else has her for a little bit. Not because I don't love her or anything like that, but when I'm the one responsible for keeping her safe and making sure she's okay, any small challenge that comes up is so much harder to process or to deal with because I am so overwhelmed versus like currently right now she's at lunch with her friends and it's someone else's like main responsibility to make sure she's okay. I feel like when something I was upset about something this morning and I like talked about it and then I was okay. But if that same thing happened like yesterday when I was right next to my grandmother, I would not have processed it the same way because my mind space, headspace, very,
Mm-hmm.
very different. So I love that you bring up the environment because even small things like who we're around or what our responsibility or role is in that very moment can completely change the way we feel. And recognizing that is also very important.
Yeah, your bandwidth is gonna, yeah, and for you again, like you're really in touch with the emotions. So you know when a lot of responsibility is on you with grandma, like, and you get more kind of maybe tough news or challenges, it just becomes overwhelming because you're already like holding a lot. Whereas right now, okay, I can maybe breathe a little easier. Someone else is in charge right now. And if something were to happen outside of grandma, like, okay, with life, you would maybe be able to welcome that challenge and say, okay, I'm going to feel it, I'm going to respond to it, and I have the bandwidth right now to deal with it.
Absolutely. And reframed like made something connect in my mind. I appreciate that so much.
Oh, good.
It's so important that we give ourselves like grace and recognize we
Yes.
made on Monday, life might feel a lot more exciting, right? Like I get to go back to work and get this done. I had some break. I enjoyed my
Mhm.
weekend. And then by Wednesday, you're like, oh my goodness, can it please be the weekend again? Why is everyone emailing me? Everyone needs something from me. I'm 2 days behind in life. Like it can be a major shift in how you
Mhm.
respond to an email on Monday. You can get the same email on Wednesday and be like, oh my goodness, go away. It's
Oh, yeah.
okay. And it's all relative to the headspace you're in, the environment you're in, and what you have going on. So, so important to recognize that. Love that you taught me that, right?
I'm glad
Major
I could teach you
epiphany.
something. I love it. Yes, I feel like that's a moment I have again to bring up my clients. I absolutely love my clients. So I'm always like my clients, and obviously a lot of it's confidential, but all of it's confidential. But general themes of being in a session, and I have a lot of clients tell me like, "Oh, wait, you reframed that for me, just made so much more sense," and that makes me happy, not because I'm doing my job well in that moment. That's awesome, but more so that you can move through life maybe again with that word we keep throwing out, shame, less shame, right? Like, and better understanding for yourself of why things feel the way that they are feeling.
Shame, because the shame is so, so much to deal with. And I
Mm-hmm.
know for me, okay, so I've always been a big crier. when I was younger, people would say though, like, big girls don't cry. Get over it, cry me a river, like all these things. And it was very invalidating. So then
Mm.
I felt so embarrassed that I would cry. Like, and I felt so like shamed of myself that I couldn't just not cry, that I couldn't hold it all in. I was struggling and going through it, and crying was the only way for me to like process and get. Someone once said that like within you, it can feel like all that overwhelmingness can feel like a fire, and crying's how you put out the fire. I really
Mm.
love that. So like
Yes.
that describes kind of my entire childhood. But I was teased and gaslighted and validated, all of that for having these emotions. So as I got older, it took a long time to build a healthy relationship with, yeah, I cry and it helps me get through because I need to get the emotion out somewhere. I used to think running was a good way to do it. Not a runner anymore. I like to run my mouth, my credit card. That's about it. Do not ask me to actually run. It's not going to happen. But like everyone has those outlets that work for them. For me, it's crying. And there was so much shame until I got to a point where I was like, this works for me. This helps me. And it's not hurting anyone. So let me cry it out. And then I
Yeah.
feel better.
Yes. And that's the idea around it, right? To feel better, to release the emotion. And that's so unfortunate that you were told those things, right? And maybe they were people trying to tell you to be strong and be comforted, but instead it created that internal, again, shame and stigma around crying. So you held it all in, and that's not beneficial to push everything down, because then maybe you are sitting next to your grandma, going back to that, and a lot of stressful things are happening on top of it. And then you're going to kind of just boil over, right? And cry, and maybe other emotions are going to come out instead of just feeling in the moment. Going back to your example of, okay, what would you do in a challenging situation? Cry and then try. It's like, well, that's why I commend you for being so connected. It's so important to feel it. So yeah, I tell people it's never fun maybe to cry. It's uncomfortable, but to allow ourselves and push ourselves in that direction if that's what our body needs to release those emotions that we maybe would normally just push down, and then it's going to come up when we least expect it and probably don't want it to.
Yes, yes. And not to say that like I'm so good at like just crying it out and getting through. I will say like last week my grandmother I left her unattended for like 10 minutes. I was doing work in my room and I was like, I'll make you breakfast in a bit. Like usually it's on the table before she gets up. It was my fault. It really was. But so she went to make herself cereal. The next thing I know, there's a fire in the microwave because she
Oh
was trying to
no.
make peanut butter and jelly in the microwave. Very cute.
Oh.
I love her so much. But I was so mad because I was like, I have so much going on for work. I've been up since 3 a.m. It's now 8 a.m. and there's a fire.
Oh
And
my
I did not
gosh.
handle that well. I was like, what are you doing? You're not allowed to cook. Like, I got so mad. I apologize. She's probably still, she might be over it. She might not remember the whole incident. However, I felt so guilty because based on everything I had going on in that moment, my reaction was like, why did you start a fire? Like, why would you even try to cook? Let me do it. Like a microwave, it's not always super easy to use when you're younger or as you get older.
Mm-hmm.
It's technology is confusing. Some
Yeah.
materials can't go in the microwave, and making sure you can be very cognizant of that is so important. And she ended up in a dangerous situation because I had so much going on. I wasn't able to pause in that moment. So for me, it's also learning like it's okay when it does boil over, but then what can I do to make up for it? Because it's not fair for me to yell at her and take it out on her. So now, how do I apologize? How do I help myself so that I don't do that again? How do I make sure she knows it's not her fault and that she still feels safe, that she can make mistakes too? Because
Mm-hmm.
realistically, like we're all going to mess up. So I think a lot of it is also knowing that, yeah, maybe crying it out is something that helps me all the time, but not all the time. Like sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I don't respond well. And now how do I move through it? Building the skills to keep growing instead of getting
Mm-hmm.
stuck in that, because that could have became like so much shame and anger and guilt instead of now I've learned something new. I need to be more cognizant of this and just move forward.
Right. Yeah, you have that extra pressure on you of being a caregiver and
It's
caretaker,
so
right?
fun.
Like, yeah. I commend you. It's really hard. It's really challenging because, right, in that moment, you're dealing with your own emotions in that kind of tough crisis situation and tending to maybe your grandma's emotions of, oh, well, what's coming up for her? I don't want to shame her. in what she was trying to do. She's just trying to feed herself and she doesn't know. And yeah, technology and microwaves are scary sometimes and intimidating. So it's a lot to process. So even telling yourself I'm not always going to get it right when I'm not only handling my own stuff, but now someone else's, that is very challenging and not something that most people could probably successfully do.
Yes. So in conclusion, if you're in high school and you're stressed about college and the next steps, stress continues. Clearly doesn't get better. No, it's so important that we learn to cope when we're younger, when we're at that point, in those earlier phases of stress. So that way, when we get to other phases of stress and other types of stress, we know what to do. Because not learning how to cope with any of it before, it got to a point where I couldn't cope at all. I didn't know what to do. So learning as soon as you can, as early as you can, because stress is not going to go away. Life stressors don't just disappear. It does not just suddenly get easier, but recognizing like, hey, I need to develop the skills. And adults, let's teach kids to develop the skills. Like, let's work together on this. But recognizing that skills need to be developed, the resiliency skills, like you said in the beginning, it's so important that we recognize the stressors are not going to go away. You're not going to get into college and life be perfect. You're not going to graduate college and life be perfect. That does not happen. So how can we develop the tools we need to get through with all the challenges that come our way?
Yeah, I love it. We're giving some hard truths, right? Like it could be discouraging to know like, oh man, I'm in high school and it's not going to get better once I go away to college. And that's not to say that life doesn't get better, right? But it's to normalize. I think we're doing a lot of that today of normalizing things and painting that picture that, yeah, life happens and definitely something maybe the both of us didn't receive. We just thought, yeah, to the beginning of what we were saying of we would graduate, go to school, be handed this job, have money, have it all figured out. When in reality, it's like, maybe life does get better for people, right? You move out and you're on your own and you're discovering yourself and making friends, and life is definitely different in college, but there's still challenges that exist. And to your point of so important to develop coping skills, developing them early, whether it's, through therapy even. I definitely wish that was something that was told to me when I was in high school. Like when, my guidance counselor saw me struggling, like, why don't you talk to someone about it? It's okay. Obviously, you're really hard on yourself and this isn't helping that. Try to figure out some ways to take care of yourself through it, because that's just going to set you up and benefit you through all the challenges that will come.
Yes, absolutely. I wish someone had taught me that as well. And I think it's so important, like you said, some things do get better and some things get more difficult as you get older. New stressors are added in. It's all normal. It's something we're all going to go through. So learning that therapy is a great tool, learning that to find other tools that work for you. It's so important because we're not in it alone. You're not the only one in it right now and going through it. And you don't have to do it by yourself. You're not in this alone. So how can we support each other? How can we develop the tools that we need? How can we keep moving forward? These are conversations we need to be having. Melissa, thank you so much for joining me today for this. Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.